Hello there guys, and welcome to another one of my reviews. Today we are going to dissect the brand new, the 2022 Volvo S90 in its T8 Recharge version. Now, what you should know about the S90 is that we're going to keep it simple. This is a rival for cars like the Mercedes-Benz E-Class, the BMW 5 Series, or the Audi A6. So it had a very short lifespan. This is just the second generation. The first one was launched at the end of the 90s and it wasn't very popular, so they pulled the plug on it. But in 2016, since they created a modular platform for cars like the XC90 or the XC60 or the S60, Volvo decided to introduce the S90 back into its fold. That was back in 2016, as I said. So this could be considered just the second generation S90, but you could consider the S80 and the S70 that were launched in the 90s and in the early 2000s predecessors for this car, at least in spirit, because their job was also to fight the 5 Series or the E-Class back then. So as I said, this car shares its underpinnings with cars like the XC90 or the XC60. And just like those cars, it received a major update in 2021. And initially it was offered in this Recharge version with 392 horsepower, but late last year it got an update as well, once again. So the 392 horsepower version was available for about 10 months. At the end of 2021, this version came out, and this is powered by a drivetrain that can deliver up to 455 horsepower, and it's quite impressive as well. It also has a bigger battery and a longer range because this is a plug-in hybrid. But in terms of design, nothing changed. Just the underpinnings of the car have been changed. So up front, you will notice a design similar to what you will find on other cars in this range. You have Thor's hammers over here in the headlamps. You have the huge Volvo grille up front, and everything is clean cut and very inspiring and elegant. Depending on the market you're in, you can get an airline version, which is a bit more aggressive, but we have the inscription version over here. So not a lot to say about the design. It's just what you would expect from a Volvo these days, and it looks just like you would expect from a sedan of this size. Now, what you will notice on the Recharge versions is this extra cap over here. That's for refilling the battery, the 18.8 kilowatt hour battery or 14.9 kilowatt hour battery, which is the actual usable capacity. We have 18-inch wheels on this car, wrapped in Michelin tires, Michelin Primacy 4 tires, which are supposed to be very efficient at the same time. While they will help out with the all-electric range of the car, they might be problematic when it comes to driving this car in a sportier manner, but I'll talk about that a bit later on. So from the sides, the proportions are very simple. The doors open wide so you can have an easy access inside, and the car is 4.9 meters long, 4,969 millimeters. So it's on average about 3 centimeters longer than all of its German rivals, and the wheelbase is almost 3 meters in length. So combined with the transverse positioning of the engine under the hood, this should offer a lot of space inside. When we're going to see about that once we hop in and talk about the specifics of this car. As for the boot, well, we have a total of 461 liters available for storage in this car. It's plenty, and I love the design out back. The resculptured tail lights look really good for the 2022 version, and it's a clear-cut design. It's a simple design that still works, and I think it will work for a long period of time. Inside the new Volvo S90, well, not a lot has changed. As you would expect, the interior looks exactly the same as it does on a number of other Volvo models, but maybe on a different scale. So it looks just like the XC90, the S60, the XC60, even the XC40 and the C40. Every single car looks roughly the same. Now, this being a sort of flagship from Volvo, even though the XC90 is the flagship, but this one doesn't go too far from the fully fledged SUV. We do have a lot of great quality materials inside, and the fit and finish is up to par with its rivals. So we have great materials all around: leather on the dashboard, leather on the top of the door panels, leather on the entire door card, as a matter of fact, even on the storage surfaces down at the bottom. So everything looks and feels incredibly nice. We have wood trims over here on the dashboard and on the door panels. Everything you could possibly wish for. And we even have this crystal gear shift selector, which is done in collaboration with Aureforce, which is a Swedish company known for its exquisite crystals. This collaboration kicked off in 2014 with the concept that prefaced the Volvo S60 and then the S90. So you can get this as an optional feature. It is lit up at night and it looks rather nice, but it's not a must-have in my book. What I will criticize is the fact that we have a lot of piano black in here, a lot of glossy black, which will attract a lot of dust and fingerprints. So you might want to keep that in mind, but it's not a huge issue. So we have the steering wheel in this bitonal configuration. It looks absolutely brilliant, and the big novelty in this car is the fact that we have a new infotainment system. I presented it to you guys on the XC60. It is built on an Android platform, and it's brand new. So basically what it allows you to do is install your Google profile, and you can add apps from the Play Store inside it without having to use your phone. The car has an onboard SIM, and that allows you to install apps like Waze, Google Maps, it's already installed, Spotify and everything inside the infotainment system. And you can use them as such without having to use your phone. So yeah, it works really nicely. I tried it out. Apple users, fret not. Even though the initial version didn't have Apple support for Apple CarPlay, now you get that. It's done via a USB Type-C cable for now, but in the future Volvo tells me that it will be available wirelessly, so that's not going to be an issue whatsoever. But in the meantime, maybe just get a Google account and install all the apps you could ever need inside this new infrastructure. So that said, let's hop in the back and see what kind of space we have in there. Sitting in the back of the new S90, you will notice that there is an ample amount of space over here. As I said on the outside, this car is 3 centimeters longer on average than most of its rivals, and it has a wheelbase of nearly 3 meters, and that shows inside. Now the driver's seat is adjusted in my comfortable driving position. I am 6 feet tall and about 250 pounds, and this is how I fit in behind someone of my stature. So plenty of room both up at the top and in terms of knee room. And the materials used inside this car are also outstanding, especially in the back. I mean, also in the back, not especially in the back, because we've seen recently in the industry a trend of using worse materials in the back of certain cars to cut costs, even on premium manufacturers. But that's not the case here. We have the same quality of materials in the back as well. Plenty of room. We even have shades for the windows and everything you could possibly need. Yes, I really like the inside of the S90. We do have a massive transmission tunnel over here, even though some cars don't really have a four-wheel drive system on board, but that's what a modular platform brings, so you have to live with this over here. But I think you could carry 3 adults abreast over here, but not for longer trips. It's a very comfortable car right here in the back, so I could imagine myself traveling for longer periods of time in the back of an S90 without an issue whatsoever. Now let's hop behind the wheel and talk about the technical side of things for a while. Now that we hopped behind the wheel of the S90 T8 Recharge, let's talk about its technical specs for a bit. Now, as you might very well know, Volvo decided a while back to limit its powertrains to 2-liter mills. They are modular engines, both diesel and petrol engines. and they have a wide variety of power outputs. And some of, well, all of them are at least turbocharged, but some of them are also supercharged. In 2020 and 2021, they started launching plug-in hybrid models. So they kept those engines intact and they added electric motors to them, a battery pack, and created plug-in hybrid versions. This is one of them. As I said, initially this car was offered under the Recharge badge with a different powertrain. Well, basically, the internal combustion engine was the same. The only difference was the electric motor, which had less power than this one. That was only the case for about 10 months. That car was on offer for just about 10 months. But then they introduced this version, which is more powerful, has a bigger battery, and it's supposed to offer more range. So the T8 Recharge has a 2-liter petrol engine under the hood that's both turbocharged and supercharged, good for 310 horsepower and 400 newton meters of torque. That's helped out by an electric motor on the rear axle that's powering the rear wheels alone, delivering 145 horsepower and 309 newton meters of torque. The combined power output in this case is 455 horsepower and 709 horsepower newton meters of torque, because both power sources can deliver their maximum output at the same time. This is not one of those systems where the electric motor is integrated into the transmission. The electric motor is a standalone unit on the rear axle alone, so it will do its own thing all alone over there. So as you can imagine, this is quite a fast car. The transmission is, when the internal combustion engine sends its power to the front wheels via a 8-speed automatic AZIN transmission, which does its job really well. And the car does have all-wheel drive, but it's an all-wheel drive system because the rear wheels are activated powered by the electric motor alone. This car will do 100 kilometers an hour in just 4.7 seconds, and that is quite fast. That also means that this Volvo will be, at least some of the time, a rear-wheel drive car, something you haven't seen on a Volvo for a while. Now, they did launch the XC40 Recharge a while back, and that car can also be powered by the rear axle alone, but other than that, we haven't seen a rear-wheel drive Volvo for quite some time. And it's quite interesting how the system works. As it would be the case with most plug-in hybrids, the car is set up to use the battery, the energy stored in the battery at first. So whenever you're setting off, if the battery is recharged, the car will start by default in the hybrid mode. That means it will select its power sources using an array of sensors and computers that are located on board. But basically it also means it will be using the electric power alone until it depletes the battery. According to Volvo, that should offer you a range of up to 90 kilometers with a full charge. Out of that 15 kilowatt hour usable battery, you should get 90 kilometers of range, which is a very ambitious target. Now, I drove the car with the battery fully charged and I got about 64 kilometers of range out of it, which is pretty good, but not close to the 90 they claim. Of course, that is a best case scenario, and during my time with the car, the weather was extremely hot and the traffic wasn't that light. So not exactly ideal conditions, so I couldn't replicate those ideal numbers. But what's interesting is that once the battery runs out, or at least the car shows you that the battery runs out, the car still behaves like a hybrid. So all the setting off will be done in electric mode. If you're stopping or decelerating, the internal combustion engine will turn off and you will be running on electric power alone, and you will be recuperating energy on decelerations. I would say braking, but it's not just braking, it's just as soon as you take your foot off the go faster pedal, the car will stop regen braking and it will recuperate energy and feed it back into the battery. And that means for the first 100 kilometers I drove this car, the fuel consumption was 1.3 liters per 100 kilometers covered, because I covered 64 kilometers on electric power alone and then did the rest using a hybrid type of driving situation. So quite efficient, I must say. But once that initial 100 kilometers has vanished, you'll probably be curious just how thirsty this car is if you have no power in the battery whatsoever. So I did my usual test cycle around town. That figure went up to 10 liters per 100 kilometers covered. Mind you, that's without any assistance from the battery. Then outside the city limits on a series of winding B roads, that went up to 6 liters per 100 kilometers covered. And then on the highway, it was 7.6 at 135 kilometers an hour average speed. So it's not bad at all, considering the kind of resources you have. And mind you, even though the car shows that the battery has been depleted, you still get all the resources you need for a, I don't know, if you want to overtake someone or accelerate harder for whatever reason, you still get access to all the power this car can provide, because it has a buffer in the battery for that type of situation. Moreover, you can use this infotainment system in order to choose what kind of driving mode you want to use. For example, if you want to use the standard hybrid mode, you can choose power mode, in which the car basically delivers all of its resources instantly to your right foot. It's a sort of a sport mode. You also have pure mode, which basically means the car will drive in electric mode for as long as it can. And you also have constant all-wheel drive, where the electric motor on the rear axle is constantly hooked up. Now, I need to mention that the car has a couple of different driving modes for the electric motor. Basically, when you're driving and you're using electric power alone, the car is rear-wheel drive. The car is pushed forward by the rear axle alone. If you're using power mode, the power will be sent to the front wheels. The power will be sent to the front wheels in the first place, and then to the rear axle. So if you use constant all-wheel drive, both axles will be powered on at the same time, as long as this driving mode is used. Now, I also have to mention, leaving all this aside, the car is incredibly easy to drive. It's very refined, very quiet, and very comfortable. The suspension setup is a multi-link one, and on the rear axle we have the traditional leaf spring in between the wheels, which is supposed to give the car a more stable feel. And that's understandable on the S90, because this is, especially on the Recharge model, because this is quite a heavy car with the added electric motor and the batteries on top. So it really helps out. And I have to say, this car's ride is very composed, very refined. It is well damped. And even though I don't have the optional air suspension on this car, I cannot complain about its comfort. It is absolutely brilliant. But what surprised me the most, because I did expect the S90 to be comfortable, what surprised me the most is the fact that it is incredibly fast. So, as I said, the car will do 100 kilometers an hour in 4.7 seconds. But that's not even half of the story, because you have zero turbo lag because of that electric motor on the rear axle. The moment you touch the go faster pedal, the car responds. It doesn't really take off until the internal combustion engine kicks in as well. So depending on what kind of driving mode you're in, the car will behave differently. So let's say you are in hybrid mode. If you press on the gas pedal, the car will react instantly because of the instant torque of the electric motor, but it won't go fast immediately. It will take a while, until like a half a second, until the internal combustion engine kicks in. If you're in power mode, you can go fast instantly. Oh. And this car doesn't only go fast in a straight line. What surprised me the most, because initially I didn't really know where the electric motor was and how it worked, what surprised me the most is that this car can actually oversteer. like I did right now. So it's quite amazing to see a Volvo oversteering, and I think that was done on purpose by the engineers to give you a more exciting feeling behind the wheel, because they could set up the electric motor as in any way they wanted, but they did it this way. They set it up on purpose to be to contribute more to the power output of the car than the front, the internal combustion engine, whenever you're pushing the car to its limits. It's quite obvious they did it on purpose, and it really works. This is a fast car, and if you wanted to, it can also be a very efficient car. I am simply blown away. I've never driven a Volvo with this much power, and that's so fun to drive. And it keeps its composure really well in the bends. Surprisingly, you can actually tell what the front tires are doing, and I would have loved a pair of Pilot Sport tires on this car to feel the road even better, because these primacy tires we have on, they're mainly made to be a bit more efficient than anything, so they will lose traction rather easily. But this is a very fun car to drive, and if you're to look into the offerings from the rivals of the Volvo S90, there are plug-in hybrid choices available, most of them within the same price range, but none of them have 450 horsepower at their disposal. So this is quite an interesting offering from Volvo. That said, this has been my review of the Volvo S90 T8 Recharge. It's a brilliant car, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. The fact that you can blow people away at the red light and then just drive home like nothing happened, sipping just 1.3 liters of fuel for a 100 kilometers covered, is absolutely stunning to me. Now, don't forget, this is a plug-in hybrid, so I would only recommend it if you're planning on recharging it, because otherwise it will drink a lot of fuel around town. So you need to keep that in mind. That said, this has been my review of the Volvo S90 T8 Recharge. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share, and of course subscribe, and don't forget to feed your passions. Ciao.